if I was turned down right then and there at the restaurant, I wouldn't have been surprised. I had no credibility. I had no, I had really nothing to my name, so I wouldn't have been shocked.
Welcome to the Revolution of One podcast, where the revolution will not only be televised, but also individualized.
Today's guest is Porter Enstrom. Porter is the founder of a company called Minutemen Delivery, a bike courier service based in Atlanta that competes with larger food delivery companies like Grubhub and Uber Eats. Today, we'll talk about the value of saying yes to the opportunities in front of you, even when they are not glamorous, and how Porter started his business with no resources. Porter, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, TK. It's great to be here.
Porter, one thing I find interesting about your story is that you were a freshman in college, you were working at Jimmy John's, and you had an incident with a customer who was unhappy with his food, and that was the thing that inspired your startup idea. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I was a delivery guy at Jimmy John's, delivering sandwiches on the nights after I was out of class. And I had this, customer I'd have pretty frequently named White. He owned a tattoo parlor on the west side of Atlanta. And I would deliver sandwiches over to him a lot. Yeah. And he was really unhappy with it because, he's like, I don't really like these sandwiches too much. Can you bring me something else tomorrow? And I thought about it for a while. And I was thinking, I had a lot of free time. And why don't I apply kind of the Uber Eats style delivery service where you have multiple restaurants to like the Jimmy John style bicycle service, where you have the quick delivery. And really just combining those two concepts together, it was able to maybe provide a solution for the guy, White or other people like him. But it was really, really interesting to see a customer in need of something that wasn't really there already.
So I'm always intrigued by the first step, because we hear so many stories of someone who said, I had this epiphany moment, this aha moment where I knew what I wanted to do for the rest of my life was XYZ. And then we hear, the story about how later on it became this great empire. But when you walked away from that moment and you finished that thought process, what was the first thing you did to actually move that idea into fruition?
Yeah, so it wasn't really like an aha moment at that time. It was more just like a seed of an idea. It was more like, this would be a cool idea. And then after the course of days and a couple weeks of really thinking about it, I thought, this may be a concept I could do. And there was a Chinese restaurant down by my dorms in Atlanta there. And I approached this Chinese restaurant because they were looking for a delivery guy. And I thought, what if I try this one concept on this restaurant to start? And I had been going through kind of mock ideas of what this, what it could look like over the course of a couple weeks. And then later it turned out the restaurant closed down. But being able to work with that restaurant, even for those couple of weeks, it was almost a month, to run through ideas and like how it could work with this one restaurant. I tried out probably 3 or 4 different types of delivery, that you could go through. And it was a failure, but it helped me move to the next concept of what it is now. So that helped out a lot.
So what was it about that failure that made you say, hey, I think I learned something that I can apply to the future rather than say, maybe this is just a bad idea?
I learned that I could not handle the entirety of what a delivery business is. I couldn't handle, building a software and building an app and understanding the logistical end of what delivery is. I knew that was above me. So that really jump-started me to looking into other companies to outsource this, delivery software to. And I ended up finding a company down in Florida. I think it was started by a couple college kids, and they build these delivery softwares, basically. It's like a startup and run for your own personal delivery service. And I ended up partnering with them to build my software and to build the app and to build the driver app and the restaurant app and all the back end of it. So it's actually run by an AI because these smart guys came up with something that would really, really work and something I would have never even imagined of building myself.
Well, one of the things I love about that is I always say you can argue for your limitations or you can fight for your possibilities. And every time you want to do something in life, you will have a legitimate, not illegitimate, you will have a legitimate excuse for why you should stop. And you can choose to endorse that legitimate excuse and use it as an out and everyone will understand. Or you can say, I'm going to negotiate that and I'm going to fight for my possibilities. And so for you, it sounds like you had a good reason to stop and say, all right, I thought this was simple. I thought I could just go to a restaurant, create a relationship, deliver the food, but I realized I have to be able to do all of these things and I don't have those skills. And instead of stopping, you said, I'm gonna find the people who have them. All right, so what did you do? Did you just get on Google and?
Basically, And at this time, I had a completely different business card. I didn't have like a good logo. I just made the logo up myself and all that sort of stuff. But from there, I started Googling all these different companies. I came up with like probably 5 different companies that actually did something along the lines of what I was looking for. But they're all extremely expensive. But I found this group of young guys building the same thing I wanted. And it wasn't as fancy, it wasn't as put together, but it really worked for what I needed it. And I contacted them. I had a couple calls with them. I emailed back and forth, and then ended up, buying the software. But yeah, it worked out great, and it runs great. So.
And who was your first restaurant?
My first restaurant was a place called Mamma Mia's Pizza and Subs up on Broad Street in Atlanta. And that was actually one of my favorite experiences, because I approached them, a cold start, and met these 2 guys that own the restaurant.
You walked in, you called?
Yep. So I walked right in. I didn't even call or email ahead, and that really didn't happen with any of these other restaurants I partnered with. And the guy was really interesting. I talked to first, and one of the most interesting parts of partnering with these restaurants is the owners of the restaurant. A lot of times they're immigrants, or they don't speak the language as clearly as you would hope. And through that experience of communicating with people that are a lot different than you, they have completely different experiences. The owner and his brother, we were able to come up with a deal, after probably an hour of working through it and understanding what each other were saying.
Yeah.
It was really quite interesting, and they gave me a chance, because I wouldn't have expected, if I was turned down right then and there at the restaurant, I wouldn't have been surprised. I had no credibility. I had no.
Right.
I had really nothing to my name, so I wouldn't have been shocked. But they gave me a chance, and they put it out there for me. And I ended up really never getting many orders from them. But the 1 or 2 that I did get, it was a success.
And the bicycle part, did that come out of pragmatic necessity, or because of what you were doing at Jimmy John's already? What made you decide this is going to be bicycle delivery?
Yeah, so I was never really a biker before I got to college, but when I did bicycle delivery with Jimmy John's, I started getting liking it a lot. But then it came out of innovation, really, where the other delivery services were doing car delivery already. Uber Eats, Grubhub, they were already doing that. Yeah. And I saw it downtown on one of the busiest streets during lunchtime. It was insane. You'd have 5 cars piled up along the sides of the street, people honking all the time, because they'd have to wait there for somebody to come down the building and grab their food. But I saw that was really inefficient, and that bikers at Jimmy John's were able to just lock up their bike real quick and actually go up inside the building and deliver it to the floor wherever they were, 10th floor or whatever. And that just sparked with efficiency. I saw that was plenty more efficient, and then customers might be even willing to pay more for that luxury of being able to stay at their desk. Yeah. And the bike part of it really came out because it's a lot quicker. It's a lot quicker than delivering in a car in downtown Atlanta, during rush hour and the like. But it's quicker, it's more efficient, and it solves the problem of congestion and the inefficiency of getting out of your car and delivering your food.
I love that you found your advantage. So this reminds me of a story. I remember my dad and a little cousin who was a little boy at this time. We were out and we locked the keys in the car. And we tried every way possible to get in, and we couldn't do it. We spent about 10 minutes trying to figure out how we're going to get in the car. And at one point, I noticed that this was a minivan, and the back window was open, and it was a very small opening. And my little cousin was small enough to where he could crawl in there, and he was able to crawl in there and unlock the door from the inside. And it was a great illustration of the advantage of being the little guy, right? We tend to look at being the little guy as always being the one that doesn't have any power. But this was one of those moments where being the little guy enabled him to do something that our size prevented us from doing. And that's something that's always possible in the realm of entrepreneurship. It's so easy to think, well, I have to have a lot of VC money, or I can't compete with GitHub or with Grubhub or Amazon or Uber. I gotta have a lot of money, I gotta be big. And what you said is, I'm gonna use my little size to my advantage. I love that creativity. That's the essence of entrepreneurial thinking to me.
Yeah, and it was really, really, really small starting. I was delivering all the orders myself for quite some time into the business, and I continued delivering on my own until I was able to find other couriers in Atlanta that were doing the same kind of thing I was, but they were basically contracting themselves out to different restaurants and to mostly delivering packages and parcels. And I made really good friends with a lot of the couriers in the Atlanta community. And they've really inspired me, to keep going and to keep building, because they're out there every day. That's what they do for a living. They get up early in the morning and they bike till the sun goes down, delivering. And yeah.
Now, I imagine this couldn't have been a walk through the park for you, because you were a freshman in college, so you had the responsibility that comes with your studies. You also had a second job at this time. You were working at Jimmy John's, and I believe you were a sign spinner?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
That was my favorite job I think I've had until now. Sign spinning was amazing. I'd go out on the weekends and I'd start really early in the morning and start spinning my sign until really late in the night. I was working for a company called A-Arrow, and they were pretty innovative as well. They would go out and contract with businesses to advertise for them. And I loved doing that. I would take the train to somewhere in the middle of Atlanta or wherever they'd assign me to go, and I'd spin the sign. And I got pretty good at it, not to lie. It was a great time. I really loved that.
Yeah. You seem like the kind of guy who has never really struggled with turning down opportunity because it didn't look glamorous outwardly. And you've been able to create a lot of wealth for yourself because you were able to say yes to things that looked small or unimpressive on the outside because you could see the potential.
So that's probably the biggest thing I would say, is to just never turn down an opportunity, no matter how small or how ugly it is. Because if you don't turn down opportunities, or if you do, you never know where that opportunity would have led you. You don't know who you would have met along the way. You don't know what it would have benefited you. As sign spinning, of course, that actually kind of looked glamorous to me at the time, just because I saw the guys out there spinning signs and everybody was honking. I love the idea of it, honestly, but to some people, I could definitely see it not looking as good. But through that, being able to stand outside on a cold day or hot day and think or listen to podcasts and start to solidify your ideas in your head first, being able to have that downtime, but also still earning money so you could work on other things. It really pushed me forward to do what I am doing today.
But Porter, I like this idea of saying yes to every opportunity, but I don't want to get stuck. I don't want to get stuck doing something that I don't love. I don't want to be a sign spinner for the rest of my life. So what do you say to that?
90% of what you're doing is not going to be great. It's not going to be fun. It's not going to be interesting all the time. But in some way, you kind of got to force yourself to like it or to enjoy what you're doing at the time, or else you're just going to be kind of miserable. At the same time, I was also doing a little bit of acting work on the side, so I would try to get extra gigs and be an extra in some movies and TV shows and stuff. So I would work during a lot of the nights. Sometimes I'd work all night and then go to class in the morning and then keep going. And of course, I hated not having enough sleep, but those experiences, or at least just being able to keep going in what you're doing, that it pushed me to keep going. It really did.
You said 90% of what you do isn't going to be fun.
It's not.
Is that true now, with you running your own business?
I mean, it's a little bit less because I'm a little bit more hands off now that I'm working remotely. But the work that I do now, I really do enjoy because I'm not necessarily out there delivering the sandwiches anymore. But to a degree, I do miss doing some of that work now. Yeah. So I've grown to really like it, and that's probably not necessarily 90% you're going to hate. More so that you're really not going to like 90% of the things you're doing right off the bat.
Yeah.
But as they grow on you and as you keep doing them and as you get better at them, you'll start to like them a lot more. And once you get comfortable in this pattern, you can really build it even further than that.
One of my favorite books is by Cal Newport, and it's called So Good They Can't Ignore You. And he talks about, the whole find your passion, dilemma that many young people experience. And he says, don't treat it as if it's something out there that you're ever going to find. Like you can just sort of engage in meditation and wake up one day and say, I know exactly what I want to do. And you go out and find something in the world that perfectly matches that. You have to develop useful skills. You have to seek out experiences, and you learn to love things by becoming good at them and by learning things about yourself that result from doing things that are new and that are often difficult. And it sounds like that's the path that you're describing there.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah. Really just jumping into whatever opportunity might come your way.
Yeah.
Because it might sound kind of cheesy, but they might be placed there for a reason. You never know. You could be, going down a path you're supposed to, because and if you reject an opportunity that comes your way, you just never know. And that uncertainty is really what would haunt me inside. If I didn't take that opportunity, or if I didn't keep going after the Chinese restaurant failed, I don't know what I'd be doing now.
Yeah.
But
so this wasn't your first time where you went after something. You got your first job when you were 11 years old?
Yeah.
I think it was selling popcorn.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, so when I was 11 years old, I volunteered up at the concession stands up at the high school in my hometown in Rock Island, Illinois. And when I volunteered there, there's a guy working the popcorn machine, and a really old guy named Jim. He asked me if I wanted to stay on every week, keep making this popcorn, because it took a bit of training, to get the popcorn machine going. And they didn't really want to keep training a volunteer every week. So I said, yeah, sure, why not? So I kept coming back every week, and I ended up working there for about 2 years. And so I would pop popcorn, and I would pop up the boxes, and I would oil down the machine, because it was this big industrial machine. And I was 11 years old. I'd have some hot oil dripping on me every now and then, burning my hands. But it was a fun time, because I'd go out to the sport games, pop the popcorn, and I'd do some janitorial work on the side too. So I'd mop the floors and clean tables. But at that age, I really just loved working on anything I could, especially being out of the house. I'd love to really just, put my hands to work.
And what was the biggest thing you learned from making and selling popcorn?
Biggest thing I learned was that, so I had two bosses. There was Jim and there was Kevin, and Jim was a great guy. These aren't probably their real names. But Jim, he was awesome, great boss, very friendly. Yeah. Kevin, not so much. And I learned that you just kind of have to take the situation you get and make the best out of it. If you got somebody in your life or at your work or that's your boss and they're kind of pushing bad energy out or they're hard on you, you just kind of have to ignore it as best you can and do the best job that you can, because it's going to be worth it in the end.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because some people use bosses like that as the basis for wanting to work for themselves. They say, I can't stand people like that. I can't stand working for mean people. That's why I want to run my own business. And I always say, well, you do know, that just means you're going to have about 20 to 100 bosses that are all really mean or who think differently than you. And there's just no way to escape dealing with human beings. To engage in entrepreneurial activity is to engage human beings. And that's just inherently difficult, and you have to develop some tolerance for that.
And that's a big thing I would say. As soon as you start your own business or you begin some entrepreneurial adventure, the minute you do that, you gain probably instantly about 2 bosses. You got your shareholders or whoever's investing in you, and you got your customer, be it one customer, however many. But yeah, with the delivery business, I've got almost, it seems like infinite bosses. With your restaurant owners, you got your investors, you got your customers. They're your probably most important boss. So yeah, you've got so many people that you're probably at the bottom of the totem pole as soon as you start your entrepreneurial adventure.
All right, so speaking of dealing with difficult bosses, I want to know your philosophy on the customer is always right. This is something that is trumped out as like an axiom in business. And at the same time, we know that customers are human beings. No human being is always right. What's your take on that? Is the customer always right?
Completely.
Yeah.
Yes, customer is always right, no matter what you're doing. So I had a really good learning lesson with the customer is always right. I was delivering an order, a couple burgers up to a big corporate building in Atlanta, and the order was taking forever. It took so long. This was one of my really early orders, actually. It was my first order, now that I think about it. My first order was going to a building downtown Atlanta, and it was taking forever, took way too long, and the order was not right when I got there. Order was completely wrong, and I was missing a burger. And it wasn't my fault necessarily, because in the contracts, the restaurant was responsible for making sure all the food was there before it was delivered. But I took complete responsibility, 110% responsibility, and offered the customer a free order the next time they ordered, because I couldn't risk losing my first customer. This was too valuable for me. And learning from that, she later on went on to order pretty much every week. Learning that lesson, first off, helped me with so many other customers down the line, because if you even show a little bit amount of kindness that a customer wouldn't expect, first off, they are so much more willing to keep coming back and coming back to you and you only. And the value that you get out of those further, engagements is far much more than that first order and being a cheap, and not giving a little bit of discount on the next one.
I love this. Now, your example, that was an instance where clearly the fault was on you. Have you ever had a situation where you felt like, but I did everything right, and they're just being mean, or they're just being unempathetic? You ever had that kind of scenario?
Yeah. So I was delivering, can't remember what it was. I was delivering an order to a hotel, and it was raining. So it rains a lot, and you still got to deliver because it's raining.
Yeah.
And that's actually when you get the most orders because people don't want to go outside. So I was delivering to a hotel, riding my bike. I laid down the brakes with this big order on my back, and I slid and I fell right on the pavement outside this hotel. It was wet, whatever, and I get up front to the lady. She's standing outside waiting for the order, and she's just mean. I mean, I tell you, just yelling at me, saying that, why are you delivering this on a bicycle? This isn't what I paid for, yada, yada. And I was like, oh, man, I don't know how to deal with this. This is my first, bad customer. Yeah. And I gave her the food with a smile on my face, and zero tip, no tip, of course, and okay, whatever. But being nice to people in the face of adversity, I think, might be a virtue. It might be something that's good just for the good of it. And it's not something that you may even get more out of. You might not even get any more value out of a person like that. But I think it's good just for the overall look of your business and the overall person that you want to be. Because a reputation is something that people think of you, and the character is something that you are. So I think having a well-rounded character especially is important.
I think what's so important about what you're saying is that you can focus on being right and winning an argument, or you can focus on thinking about what your goal is and making sure you're positioning yourself to achieve that goal. And usually when you choose the debate option, I'm going to argue with the customer and contend with them, you're usually moving away from what you want. So even if you're right logically, you're just getting further and further away from your goals. And so I've talked with people who have a lot of trouble with that concept, because it makes it sound like we're saying that fallible human beings are always correct just because they're customers. But it's not a literal truth. It's a mental model that says that when you're engaging a customer, you are never going to win by trying to convince them that they are wrong. And if your approach to getting what you want is trying to get someone else to agree with you about how much of an idiot you think they are being, you're not going to get what you want. You're going to lose every single time.
I completely agree.
Yeah. All right. So you are a student at GSU. You launched the business when you were a freshman, and there was a startup program there.
Yeah, there's a startup incubator at Georgia State University called Launch GSU, and that really didn't come into presence for me, at least, until sophomore year, so a little bit later on. Okay. But I still did have my business, and that's been a huge support and a huge tool that I've been able to use. They provide a space. It's a large office. They actually provide me with a mailbox and an address so I can keep my business going when I don't have a home address in Atlanta anymore. And they provided me guidance and networking opportunities and a couple showcases and places I can really stretch my ideas and my business to solidify it a little bit more. And there's a manager there, and she's just helped me tremendously. People there with plenty of experience in business, and they're always looking to help out. So if someone is a student at GSU, or they're thinking about going there, and they want that 15-second elevator pitch for what Launch GSU is, what would that be? Launch GSU is a space in an area where entrepreneurs can come together and incubate and learn and bounce ideas off of each other to further their own goals. Gotcha. That's pretty much it. Yeah. You're a philosophy student and an econ student there? Yeah. So I study business economics, and I'm also studying philosophy. And I've really, really enjoyed that. I started with an intro to ethics class, then got pushed up further, and I started taking a couple senior level philosophy classes, which really got me interested and involved more in the philosophical economics community, of classical liberalism. Yeah. And from there, I was able to work a little bit at the Institute for Humane Studies, which has been a huge help. That organization has been an absolute game changer for me. Since they put on a discussion colloquium here in Atlanta, was my first real it was my first real look into the world of like academics and people who love just ideas. Yeah. And I was able to discuss ideas there for a whole day with them on a Saturday, and we were in a room and discussing ideas, and it was a game changer.
One of the things you and I talked about is like ideas and creativity have the power to change the world, and that we have a much greater ability than we often suppose to have a positive impact on society, to create a freer world, than just taking the political approach of hoping the right person gets into office. Tell me your thoughts on that.
I believe it's got to be a complete bottom-up approach. I mean, change really starts with individuals changing their own individual actions and learning from each other and seeking out new and different ideas that might seem foreign at first, but become less foreign and become, more innate. And once you start to seek out opinions of an alternative view that you would have never thought or never have considered, that's really when you learn. And I've been recently just kind of caught in an echo chamber kind of ideas where I'm hanging around a lot of the same people, a lot of the same beliefs, and I've noticed that although it's good and although it's great for my professional development, it's somewhat limiting in that I learn the most when I'm around people that disagree with me, and I learn the most when I'm around people of opposing views, and when you are able to see a different side of thought, that's when you learn the most, and that's when you discover the most.
I heard Ravi Zacharias, Christian apologist, philosopher, say that when you're in those discussions with people you disagree with, it's easy to shed more heat than light. How do you transform discussions, tense discussions about political differences, philosophical differences, into learning opportunities?
Lesson number one is listen. And that was the biggest thing I learned. I think I actually learned it from Star Trek. Listening is the most important thing, because a lot of the times when we listen to somebody that is talking to us about an opposing political view, we just jump to a conclusion that, oh, this is the view that they have, so I already know their conclusions and I already know what they're going to say, and I don't really even have to listen to the content of what they're saying, because they could actually be saying something completely different and something that you didn't even expect for them to say. And a lot of the times we jump to those conclusions. And if you actually listen to what they say, you might even change your own mind. And you might even figure out something that later on you'll even go back to and think, oh, maybe this plays into my own idea a little bit differently. So listening to them. And then also, if you've got an idea, it's better not to argue with a person. It's better to ask questions and take, I guess, the philosophical route of it. Asking questions and trying to understand their view or their opinion first of all, before you even come close to throwing your own view out in the air or arguing your point. It's helpful to listen and to make sure that you understand their position.
You know what's great about that advice is it's very self-interested. It's easy to look at this stuff in within the context of like being the bigger person, right? Like, oh, I'm gonna listen to this other person because that's the morally right thing to do, and that's what I'm supposed to do. Okay, yeah, you can make that case, but how about just being the better person? I mean, when you listen to others, you learn, and when you learn, you pick up new conceptual tools that allow you to more effectively create the results that matter to you.
Oh yeah, yeah, I completely agree, and I don't even think it's the morally right thing to do necessarily. It's just, I can't remember who said it, but somebody said that if you don't know the opposing view, you probably don't even know half of your own view, basically.
Yeah.
So if you don't know fully the position of the opposition, then you don't even know half of what you actually believe, because you really need to know all sides of a case before you can develop your own opinion. And without that knowledge of somebody that disagrees with you, you're never going to fully formulate any sort of idea of your own.
Yeah, and if you really take your beliefs seriously, then you should believe, it seems to me, that those beliefs can stand up to scrutiny, right? Now, as a philosophy major, people often ask, well, who's your favorite philosopher? I know not to ask you that, but what's one book that kind of set you on the path of thinking more philosophically about your everyday choices?
Definitely. So I think I was handed this, it wasn't even really a book, it was a pamphlet. And I was handed this sometime, I think, freshman year. It might have been at an Institute for Humane Studies event. I was handed iPencil. And I actually believe it's published by Fee now.
Yeah.
And that really changed everything that I thought. It really changed how I look at small things, like very small things from the bottom up, and seeing how many people it takes to make just one thing that I take completely for granted in a normal day. Like the amount of people it takes to stitch together a coat and to dye the fabric and to package it and ship it. I mean, all the people working together for this common goal that they don't even necessarily might even find common. And they could be working together, and they might even hate each other if they had met each other in real life. But they're all working together to produce this one thing. And that pamphlet I penciled changed how I look at a lot of things.
What's one thing out there in the real world that you look at differently now as a result of that?
Any sort of consumer product, any consumer product whatsoever. I look at that and I think about how many people it's taken for that product to get here. And it's pretty humbling, actually. And it lets you take things a little bit more seriously. It encourages you to waste less, because this is somebody's labors. This is thousands and thousands of people. It's all their labor culminating into this one object for your pleasure. And just knowing the seriousness of that, it helps you to take the world a little bit differently.
Yeah. Porter, one of the things that made me excited to talk with you, and this is my final question here, is I love that you were able to launch a business in spite of the fact that you were busy, in spite of the fact that you were really young, in spite of the fact that you didn't have a bunch of financial resources to devote to it, in spite of the fact that your competitors were all big and had all the advantages, in spite of the fact that you had to be able to do so many things that you didn't know how to do. You had all the legitimate excuses to opt out, and you chose to do it anyway. For people out there that feel like they have ideas, but they don't have those advantages, or they have too many problems, what parting piece of wisdom would you share with them for overcoming odds?
Yeah, I definitely didn't have the resources to start what I did start. But making use of anything that you have around you, making use of any single opportunity, and that doesn't necessarily mean money or physical objects. That could mean the extra time that you have, or somebody that you know, or your friends that are really good at this one little thing and you're really good at this other little thing, and being able to manage those resources, not physical wealth resources, but the resources of time and people's labor, being able to manage those in a correct and efficient manner, and being able to look at something and figure out that it's a problem, number one, and figuring out a solution to that problem, number two. It all works together to create something beautiful. It works together to create something innovative, because if you can manage those resources effectively to fix that problem, to make that solution, that's who changes the world, in my opinion. Those are the individuals that build from the bottom up, and they are the ones that create this new world that we want to live in. And that's who the politicians look at. And that's who they then see as a lagging indicator of change.
Porter, couldn't have said it better myself, man. Thanks for joining me.
I appreciate it, TK. It's been a great time.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If you'd like to follow our guests on Instagram, you can check them out at instagram.com/Porter. That's POR2TER. You can also follow the website at minutemendelivery.org. Also, check us out on Instagram, instagram.com/FeeOnline. Subscribe to us on YouTube at youtube.com/FeeOnline, and subscribe to our podcast on Google Play, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts via our website, fee.org/Rev1. Don't forget to leave a review, and thanks for tuning in.